So I was thinking when I got the message a week or so ago from Megan about Masterclasses, I thought, well, I've been really trying to keep my fear in check, and I bet other people have been too. And this is a place where my life coach training comes in handy, so maybe I could share some of that. So with that in mind, I kind of created an outline so that I don't wander off topic and go on for too long. And I also created a summary sheet, and I'd be happy to email that to you afterwards. If you want to, just email me, Gwen at act2lifecoaching.com, and I can send it to you as an attachment. So first, a quote from Jean Kerr. I found this a couple of weeks ago, and it made me smile. Hope is the feeling you have that the feeling you have isn't permanent. I like that. The feeling that you have that the feeling you have isn't permanent. So, first of all, let's recognize there's a lot to be fearful of right now with all the great unknowns and the sickness, the spread of it, the isolation, routines overthrown. And I guess even perhaps what makes it hardest is we have no idea how long this is going to go on. And just even saying those things, I feel my stomach change. So we have a lot. Fear is not unreasonable, but what can we do about it? Life coaching, to tell you very quickly, life coaching is about assembling tools for how you can deal with the things that happen to you. I always like to tell new clients that my job as a life coach is to work myself out of a job, because you have the tools you need to do what you want. And what you need to do with what's going on in your life. So I've come to think of my fear tool as being, I picture it like a milking stool, and that may sound odd, but milking stools traditionally have 3 legs, and they have 3 legs because 3 legs are more stable than 4. I think probably this came from the fact that barns way back when maybe didn't have level floors, and so if you 3 legs will find a stability that 4 legs might teeter, and 2 legs, of course, doesn't even stand. So I like thinking of my fear tool as having 3 legs. And I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the specific life coaching one. But first, I think the first leg of the stool is faith. And I say this really, I don't want to get into theology. I say it in the sense of a larger mystery, a 30,000-foot view of a bigger picture. We're not in control. In case we ever thought we were, we're sure getting the message loud and clear now that we're not in control. This is a good thing, even when we're engulfed in the deepest fog and we have no compass, because we're not wise enough. We can't see enough of the total picture. So what we have to do is figure out how to be where we are now. All we have is this very minute now. The second leg is community. And even as we practice physical distancing, and I heard the other day, it's not so much social distancing as physical distancing, and I like that, because we're fortunate to be able to be in contact with each other, like right now, or over the phone, because sharing our vulnerability lowers our feelings of desperation as we comfort one another. Truly, a sorrow shared or a burden shared is a burden lightened. So we need to reach out, and I think we need to reach out not only to our close circle, but to the tiers beyond that, to people we sort of know, or to neighbors we don't know very well, and call someone, and just someone who would love to know that they're being thought of. So that's the second leg. The third leg is the life coaching specific part, and that's understanding how emotions work and how we can work with them. And that's where I want to concentrate what I have to say. So I think a good place to start is with Martha Beck's change cycle description. Martha Beck was the association with which I did my life coach training. And she has this construct. She talks about the basic change cycle, and picture a big square with 4 little squares. And there are square 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then off to one side is a little triangle that says catalytic event. So what she's basically saying is we go along in our merry lives, or maybe not so merry, but we know what we're doing and how we're dealing with things, and something happens. That something might be the birth of a baby, something joyful, a wedding. That might be a child going off to college. That might be losing a job. That might be the coronavirus. But something happens that sets everything off into turmoil, and suddenly life as we know it is upended. And so she says that throws us square, right plunk, slam dab into square one. And the job in square one is to grieve what we've lost and to understand that something has died. I mean, life as we know it has died. It will come back in some form. We don't know how. But the first thing we need to do is to accept that things have changed. So another way to look at this is to think about a butterfly. Now, the butterfly starts off as a caterpillar. What happens between a caterpillar and the emergence of a butterfly is a not very pretty process. This butterfly gets into the pupa stage and into the cocoon, and the thing that happens is it totally disintegrates. So this is kind of an interesting parallel. It totally disintegrates, but all those molecules reform and make something that in time emerges as a butterfly. I like to hang on to that image when times are tough, that I don't know what's going on, but this can become a butterfly. So what do we do when we're in square one? The first thing to think about with emotions is that we have to allow them and acknowledge them. And frankly, to say, I don't know what in the world is going on, but that's okay. It has to be okay with us that we don't always know what's going on. Then when we're in this square one death process of things just being not at all what they're supposed to be, what do? We hunker down. Well, we've had some help with that because we've been told to hunker down and to stay home and so forth. But then once we're hunkered down, here's where it gets a little harder and where we have to work at it, because we have to get still. You know, I think sometimes when I'm threatened, my first reaction is to go into super high gear and think of all the things I can do, when what I need to do is be. I need to be still and just let my body catch up with what's going on. And then we need to gather information, and we need to avoid making any big decisions that can possibly be put off. The time of disintegration is not a time to be plotting and planning big things if we don't have to be. Postpone what we can, defer what we can, hunker down, and work at getting still. We have to remember that things will become clearer as the days go on. And really, this is where we get into another chief tool of life coaching, which is self-talk. Nobody talks to you more than you talk to you. Nobody talks more to me than I talk to me. So what I'm saying to myself becomes really very important because I start to believe it. So watch what you say to yourself and remind yourself that, I mean, it isn't Pollyanna talk to try to be positive and see the best. It actually is a tool that helps you cope and deal. And as I'm sure I've probably already said this, but as much as possible, we have to stay just in this very moment. And here's what's tricky for me and maybe for you. Beyond getting adequate information, I mean, I do feel like I want to have a sense of what's going on, but it's so easy to go from getting adequate information to checking the internet once an hour, to looking for more news. That is not helpful. We need adequate information, but not more than that, because it just ups the ante for what we're worrying about. So we have to try to balance getting information with doing things that calm us and asking yourself, what does calm you? For me, one of the chief joys is I'm so glad I can still get out and walk, because using that energy, I mean, it releases endorphins, and what a gift. I'm looking out my window at dogwood blossoms in several colors and bright blue sky and green grass. I mean, what a gift that spring doesn't know there's a problem. I mean, she's just appearing in all her technicolor glory. And there's comfort in that for me, that feeling like, we're going to get past this. This too shall pass. But I need to do the things that can help me. And I need also to be open to new ideas, because the way I've been doing things and my normal construct, that doesn't totally serve now. So I'm looking to different things that I can do and things that help me. Oddly for me, one thing has been a jigsaw puzzle. I've taken out a jigsaw puzzle. It's a very hard one. I don't know if I will ever finish it. But and the interesting thing there is it calls on a different part of my mind. When I'm looking for that dumb piece that has a little pink knob in it, I am not worrying about the world. So think about things that you can do that may be different things. And then I think you also, in your self-talk, have to practice trust, which ties us right back to that other leg of the milking stool of faith. These things are related. So we have to remind ourselves to think about the bigger picture. And, we can only cope with this very minute. At this very minute, we're okay. And that's what we have to focus on. So, and I think also remembering that I believe there is power in the force field of positive energy. I think when we put out positive energy, that may be prayer, that may be compassion for others. I mean, give it any name you want. I think it's a force in this world, and I think we need all that we can get right now. So now let's get more specific about dealing with emotions. And I think the first thing to say is we have to own them. We have to admit what we're feeling, because anything that we pretend we're not feeling, we're burying, and buried feelings, all they do is fester and multiply and get bigger. So how do we own them? The very first thing to do, and I've just mentioned this actually, is to sit still. Sit still right now, sit still, and assess what you are feeling in your body, not what you're thinking in your brain. One of the most interesting things that happened when I went through my life coach training was realizing how much we've been taught to describe our feelings in terms of mental thoughts. So when somebody says, "What are you feeling?" we say, "Oh, I'm sad." Well, that's a mental construct. What am I feeling? That would be saying, okay, when I'm afraid, I feel my chest constrict. I feel my stomach tighten at the same time that butterflies jump around in it. And I feel the bands of the muscles in the back of my shoulders just tighten and constrict. That is what my body is feeling. And the first thing about emotions, to know about emotions, is they live in your body, not in your mind. And the body has memory of these things. So you need to access that part of yourself. And then you have to, this may sound counterintuitive, but you have to say yes to that frightened body, literally. And think about, somebody said to me once, we were discussing fear during my life coaching training. And the question was to someone who was greatly afraid, how old are you? How old is the person that's feeling that fear? The interesting answer, almost any time you ask anybody how old they are when they're afraid, they usually say 4. They're 4 years old. They feel like, because they feel like a helpless child. So inside of us, fear most likely is a helpless child. And we need to say yes to that child, almost like we're standing aside her and saying, "Oh, you poor little thing, I understand that you're afraid. It's okay, we'll get through this together." Self-talk, but it changes the frame to accept the fact that there's someone inside that is afraid. So what do you do with the fearful feeling? You've said yes to it. You've welcomed it. It's hard. Who wants to feel negative feelings? But you've said, okay, this is what I'm feeling. I'm going to deal with it, because if I don't, it's only going to get bigger. Now, sit back and take 3 really deep breaths. And before we do that, let me tell you the science behind this. We evolved, our primitive brain has very strong flight or fight or freeze um, instincts. And so if a building is burning, if my house is burning down, I'm going to go on high alert and I need to get out of here. I need to be active. If I look out my window and I see a dog about to attack a child, I need to go out and chase that dog away. That's the flight or fight kind of thing that our brains activate. The problem is, as we have evolved into more sophisticated problems, they're not served by flight or fight, and yet that's our brain still sends that same kind of message to us. So when you breathe deeply, and by deep breathing, and we'll do this in a minute, I mean you take in as deep a breath as you can, and you hold it shortly. When you let it out, the exhale is even longer. And the pause before the next intake, I mean, you don't want to be gasping for breath, but you let some time go by before you take in the next breath. You do that 3 times, and I would like to take the time to do that right now. So 3 breaths. First in, as fully as you can, pause and hold. Release. And wait. Take in another breath, slow and full. Hold. Release. One more. Notice how you feel. Do you feel any different? Okay, you can't answer me. I'm hoping you do. I do. I notice a slight damper on the feeling of anxiety. And when I wake up in the middle of the night, which I do sometimes, and all of a sudden I'm anxious, that's the very first thing I do. I say, okay, Gwendolyn, 3 deep, in and out. It does help to calm because see, what I'm doing is I'm telling that primitive part of my brain, your response here isn't needed, is incorrect. You're giving me feedback that is inappropriate to this situation. Okay, I'm afraid of something, but it isn't something I can run away from or go smash a dog or whatever. So first thing always with any emotion you're feeling is that deep breathing. And 3, I mean, more is okay, but 3 really is a magic number. Don't do less than 3. So after you've done this, you want to understand, especially if your fear is born of a global issue like this pandemic, you have to try to enlarge the view of the world you're looking at and understand, okay, this isn't just me, this is bigger than me, and I need to tie it in. This ties into that other leg of the stool, the faith aspect. It's a little soothing. Hopefully it's a little soothing to do this. The next thing I like to do is to do the loving kindness prayer. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but if you're not, I'll read it to you, and it's on the sheet that I can send you. Now, oddly, we've always been taught not to be selfish, and we should pray for others, and we should think of others before we think of ourselves. But the thing is, the loving kindness prayer is we are taught to pray first for ourselves. And the reason is we have more to give when we settle ourselves first. So if it is light that I would like to give to the world, I need to pray that I might have the light to give the world. So here is the loving kindness prayer, and I will read it first in the personal mode. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be safe from inner and outer dangers. May I be well in body and mind. May I be at ease and be happy, because these are all the things we would like to help bring to others. I'll read it again, and I'll read it from a larger point of view. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be safe from inner and outer dangers. May you be well in body and mind. May you be at ease and be happy. And even larger, may everyone be filled with loving kindness. May everyone be safe from inner and outer dangers. May everyone be well in body and mind. May everyone be at ease and be happy. So these are a few things that you can do about fear. And I want to just recap quickly these last few things, just to review them. First thing is you own a feeling. You sit still. You assess what you're feeling, and you're careful to do it from your physical point of view. That doesn't mean you can't also think about what your thoughts are telling you, but it's important what you're feeling. You say yes to your frightened body. You almost step outside of yourself to comfort that frightened body. And you do this by deep breathing. You do this by enlarging the picture to knowing that it's not just you. And you use the loving kindness prayer. So now I'd like to tell you a few things to remember about emotions. First of all, I never thought of this until I was in life coach training. The biggest part of the word emotion is motion. Emotions move. They're not static. They don't stay the same, and they stay the same longer when we try to pretend they're not there. My first real experience of this was with deep grief. I can remember times when I thought, get to tomorrow? I don't think I can get through the next 10 minutes feeling that way. And 10 minutes later, thinking to myself, wow, I can't say I feel good, but I don't feel the same. Nothing had changed. My situation was no different, but emotions ride in waves, and they do that. We are evolved to be able to live with our emotions. They're actually meant to be our helpers. But remember that they move. They're not static. They ebb and flow, and they'll do so much more if we say yes to them and we treat them kindly. They don't need to be ruled. We can't say, I will not feel sad, or I will not feel tight. We can't do that. We don't have that in our power. So if we can't rule them, we need to tolerate them and express them, hopefully appropriately. So doubling back to the self-talk strategy, the more consciously we can create a positive attitude and focus on hope, the better we'll do. So a few weeks ago, when we first started with this idea of self-distancing, social distancing, and so forth, I got right on with, it's not hard for me, I live alone. But I was out for a walk one morning and I thought, it feels so fear-based to me to say I'm staying home because I'm afraid I'll get sick. And I walked this is what I love about walking. I get all my best ideas when I'm walking. And then I walked a little farther and I thought, I'm staying home because it is helpful for me to do so. It's helpful for me personally, but moreover, it's helpful to the larger population if I stay home as much as I can. Now, notice here, the action isn't different. I'm still staying home, but I'm doing so from a sense of empowerment and not from a sense of victimhood. It's an important difference, and it helps in that positivity thing. So now I want to share you some thoughts some thoughts about fear. This is from a book by Ezra Bida called Saying Yes to Life, Even the Hard Parts. And this is on the sheet that I can share with you. So I want to read it to you though. Ezra Bida says, everyone feels fear, but giving in to fear is what makes our lives narrow and dark. Fear-based action is the source of all conflict. Fearful response, the root of all sorrow. Fear is what prevents intimacy and undermines love. But we're often not aware of how fear drives so much of what we do. Every time we give in to fear, we lose our life. In fear, we imagine a terrible future. And in this imagining, we create a terrible present. We bring on ourselves the very misery that we are trying to push away. The secret to living with fearful feelings is saying yes to the objects of fear, not being swallowed by them, but welcoming them as invitations to move forward toward freedom. Fear tells us to stop. to stay within the boundary of our protected cocoon world. Yet when we feel fear, if we take even one small step toward it rather than yielding to our habitual pulling away, we move one step closer to the vast mind that lies beyond. Again, I'm noticing how all these three legs of this stool of faith and knowing the physical parts of emotion and sharing, and they all tie together. Excuse me, I'm interrupting myself here. We move one step closer to the vast mind that lies beyond. When we fear fear, instead of saying, I'm afraid, thus reinforcing our identification with our fear as who we are, we can simply say, fear is present. Thus, fear's power gradually dissipates because we aren't fear, fear is present. So its power gradually dissipates and we begin to free ourselves from it. When we simply experience fear just as it is, without our opinions, judgments, and reactions, fear is not nearly so frightening. So a couple last things before I open for questions. Questions to ask yourself when you're feeling fear. I mean, this is a list that came up in something I was reading. What would calm do now? What would peace do now? What would relaxation do now? And what's funny for me is the answer to all three of those questions is the same. Stop and breathe. What would calm do now? It would stop, it would breathe, perhaps assess. Peace, relaxation, the same. So being as kind to ourselves as we can be, and I don't know if you're like me, I tend to beat myself up when I can't master my feelings and overcome them and be larger than them. I have a friend who says, you know, I like to understand things, and I have a friend who says to me, yeah, understanding everything changes nothing. But understanding does give me a little inkling into how to coach myself into the best possible responses that I can make in a moment. So I want to close this part with two thoughts. One is a quote from Teddy Roosevelt. When you're at the end of your rope, tie a knot and hang on. And the other one is from Louis L'Amour. There will always come a time when you believe everything is finished. That will be the beginning. So with that, Megan, perhaps we can open it up and see if anyone has questions.
Gwen, this is incredible. Everything that you said is something that I have intuited, if that's a word. And that's the way I've been trying to live these last 3 weeks, particularly, that I honestly am considering a gift from God, a gift from life, a gift of beauty. And so to hear you put it in your professional words is just affirming for me that that this is the way we need to be living. And I am grateful for this time in my life that I can live this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. You know, I think we all know all these things intuitively. The thing is, we don't always access them. I believe we have, and that's really what life coaching is all about, is saying that we all have this intuitive wisdom. We just need to get quiet enough, calm enough, believe in ourselves enough to access those things. So thank you very much, Donna. Thank you for listening. I hope it helps you, because as I said, this is my little cheat sheet here. When I start to get panicky, I think, okay, time to apply the rules. So thank you very much.